Good morning. This is retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church, a little Lutheran church in Amherst, New York, suburb of Buffalo, northeast there of Buffalo. Well, we want to welcome you to our service this morning. It's July 9th of 2023, pretty much past pandemic now, for the most part. A few people are still getting it, but for the most part, don't have to wear masks much anymore, and most people are pretty healthy now. Well, we welcome you to our broadcast here. It's the fifth Sunday of Trinity, which is the second half of the church year. And church year is divided in two halves. First half begins with Advent, the story of Jesus' life and death and resurrection. And this is the second half of the church year. It deals with issues regarding the church and the lives of God's people. Well, this morning, the text appointed from the Gospels is from the Gospel of Luke, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them, and they were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little bit from the land, and he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered him and said, "Master, we have worked all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at your word I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they gathered a great pile of fish, and their net started to break. And they called to their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come out and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they both began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he was amazed, and all that were with him, at the catch of fish that they had just taken. So also was James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, "Fear not, from henceforth you shall be catching men." And when they brought their ships to land, they left all and followed him. That ends that portion of the gospel text from the Gospel of Luke, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. Now, Simon Peter, he was pretty worldly smart guy. He ran a business and took care of his business with his partners. They had a couple ships. They fished, and usually when you fish, there's different levels of the business. You not only catch the fish, but you have ships to maintain, so you have to be a bit of a carpenter. And we've recovered some Jewish boats from the Sea of Galilee that are about 2,000 years old. And they were pretty weird little boats. They weren't fancy shipping boats like we have now for catching fish with steel hulls and big diesel engines and all the rest. These were kind of what we would call rickety. In fact, the ribbing on these boats, for the most part, didn't even line up very well. It wasn't what a proper, a boat right would build, where you have ribbing and struts that, line up left and right down the center of the hull. These boats were just mostly stick-built, and from looking at the remains of some of them, which had been encased in mud and recovered after a couple thousand years, it's amazing that they would hold together. Of course, it's also a good reason why a bunch of them are at the bottom of the lake too, because that area is littered with a bunch of boats at the bottom. Reason being that the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea are in line in a valley, beginning up in the plateaus north, and it runs down quite a few miles and drops down in elevation. So by the time you get to the Sea of Galilee, you've gone from the highlands off the Mediterranean further north. You've dropped down in elevation about 600 feet by the time you get to the Sea of Galilee. And if you follow the Jordan Valley further downhill, it takes you south down to the Dead Sea, which is about 1,200 feet below the Mediterranean, below sea level. And so you've now reached a real low point. But what that means is that the winds come funneling down that valley, and quite out of nowhere, big storm can blow up. You find these things out west sometimes in recreational lakes that are in these mountain valleys. The storms blow up, and there's boats at the bottom of those lakes too, even modern boats, because out of nowhere you could be enjoying a sunny day fishing and swimming and all that in the sun, and next thing you know, you've got 5, 6, 7 foot waves around you. Well, that's what these guys were used to here. They were, and Peter wasn't easy to get along with. He was pretty tough. Here Jesus comes along, and he's not a fisherman. He's by trade he's grown up a carpenter, so then working in his dad's carpentry shop. So he doesn't have the soft hands of a scholar. He's got worn hands of a carpenter. So he's got blistered hands. He'd be strong because growing up in a carpentry shop that's run by family, as a kid, he's the eldest son, you'd be carrying and delivering furniture, and which meant hoisting it up on your back and carrying it around town or down the valley to different houses around Nazareth. So you develop pretty good muscles doing that, and you would not be an academic. You wouldn't be a college boy. You'd be a working man. Well, that was Jesus. So Jesus comes up to these guys, and they're working men too. They're fishermen, and like I say, they have all levels of work. They got to repair their boats. They got to handle the business. They got to gather up the fish. They got to get down to market and sell the fish. And usually when you do that, I was down the Florida Keys for a while, you not only have fish and selling fish, but you usually have a little restaurant tucked in the middle of all that where some of the family members will have, fish dinners and sell beer with that or whatever. And that would be pretty common around the world pretty much, and that's what they did too. So Peter was a regular guy. Jesus looked just like a regular guy. Wasn't anything about his appearance would say, scholar or anything else like that. No soft hands there. He was rough and tough, just like Peter. Lifetime of working. Jesus was at least about 27 at this point. So Jesus comes along there, and a whole bunch of people have been listening to him teach, and it's Bible stuff. Well, Peter is not a real big Bible scholar. He's more of a fisherman, hard working, hard drinking, hard playing. And we know later in the Gospels he carries a knife, and he's not adverse to fighting with a knife because he attacked the servant of the high priest, and that turned out to be a pretty nasty brawl. Well, anyways, so he sees Jesus coming along, and he's teaching Bible stuff, and which I'm sure struck Peter a little weird because, he didn't look like a scholar, he didn't smell like a scholar, he was more of a hard-working guy and looked like a hard-working guy, and so Peter must have been a little bit confused by that for sure. But a whole bunch of people were following Jesus and listening to him, which I'm sure made no sense to Peter, but part of the problem was these people listening to Jesus happened to be Peter's customers. And so when Jesus asked Peter to set the boats back out and bring their nets, well, Peter and his pals weren't fond of that idea because, when you get done fishing, you got a lot of work to do. You got to clean out the boats, you got to get your nets repaired, you got to try to sell what little you may be caught. And they hadn't caught much of anything, so I'm sure the families on land were a little bit angry with them for, having an awful day because, if you're a fisherman and you don't catch fish, well, it is your fault, right? Not the fish's fault. At least that's what your family will think. So I'm sure he wasn't having a good day. And Jesus comes along and says, Peter, hey, let's put your boats out. And if it weren't for that, all the people listening to Jesus were Peter's customers, I'm sure Peter would just said, take a hike, leave, get out of here. What are you, annoying me? Are you kidding? We're tired. Go away. But that since his customers were listening to this guy and he didn't want to make his customers angry at him, he says, all right. He argued with him a bit, but he knew he wasn't going to get anywhere. So he said, okay, yeah. So they put their boats out and first his, and they started catching fish like crazy. And then he called for his partners, and they brought the other boats out, and they started filling them up, and everything was just piles of fish and flapping fins and tails, and there was Jesus just standing in his boat and smiling away, and Peter's like, you're in a way, we're fishing here, and Jesus just standing there smiling, and the fish are piling up higher and higher, and the other boats got piles and piles of fish. Now the boats are beginning to sink because, well, a lot of fish are heavy, and the fishermen are like, what's going on here? Peter's like, oh, crud. Oh, I don't need this today. Because this guy who looks like a carpenter, who is a carpenter, Peter's figured something out. And Peter's figured out that this is no carpenter. Because what's going on is just too weird. Jesus says fish, and now they fish, and the fish seem to be obeying this carpenter and are just getting in the boat, practically climbing in themselves. Peter figures out, oh, crud. This is either a prophet or the Lord or something. And Peter, not being an overtly religious man, he's Jewish, but that doesn't mean he's a choir boy. He just falls down at Jesus' feet and says, oh, okay, you know what, I give up. And this is where Peter gets it. Of all the ideas he's had so far, this is the dumb one. This is where Simon Peter is really stupid. Because, see, he has the common idea of religion. And the common idea of religion is that there's good people, pious people, holy people, and they must be close to God. And then there's the regular folk who, eat, drink, get married, have kids, and swear and curse and get into fights and just ornery, cantankerous, tired, hard-working folk. And Peter doesn't see these two people as having anything to do with each other. In fact, he sees this whole religious thing as only for these pious do-gooder types and, better than thous. And so Peter, in his mind, he doesn't see any place for religion in his world, in his life. In fact, him and God don't belong in the same boat. And that's what he says. In Greek, what Peter says exactly is exelthe ep emu. Exelthe. It's a Greek verb. It's actually two words together. Ex and elthe, from erkomai, which is, erkomai means to take a journey. And ex means like out of it, away from here. And when you put take a journey and away from here, basically Peter is telling Jesus, hike off. You need to leave. And op is away from, and emu is me. So Peter, this shows that Peter just even though he's got the common appreciation of what religion is, and it's some pious nonsense for do-gooders, he doesn't get it at all. Because that's not what religion is. And so he makes the biggest mistake of his life and says, you know what, Jesus? You need to go. One of us needs to get out of this boat now, because I don't belong here, or you don't belong here. But in either case, we don't belong together, because apparently nature and the fish and everything just listens to you, and you're religious something, prophet or God or something, and and then he tells Jesus who he is. He says, "Hote aner amartelos emi." He says, because aner, that's a husband. Amartelos is sinful, bad. Emi, I am. He says, because I'm a bad husband. Now, being Jewish, Peter would have had 2, 3 wives. In fact, being a business partner in a fishing business, he would have been required to, by the law, to have 3 or 4 wives. That would be the common way of life in Jesus' day for Jewish men. If you were had a job, you were handy, you had could make money, well, you were expected to have at least 2, 3, 4 wives. And they were considered co-wives. And they could be Jewish, they could be Gentile, they could be free, they could be slaves. They're all different categories of co-wives. If you want more information on that, all you have to do is go to the Mishnah, which is the oral law of the Jews. Which is the oral law for the Jews is more authoritative even than the Torah, because the oral law is handed down, father to son, rabbi to people, since the days of Moses. And so the oral law is most sacred, and that's where we find in the Mishnah lengthy articles on wives and co-wives. Anyways, so Peter says, look, you need to get away from me, because haughty, that's a resultative or purpose clause, for the reason being, you need to get away from me. The reason being, I'm a bad husband. Even though he has several wives, who knows what else he's doing. He may be cheating on them. He might be running with some women down at the bar. Who knows? But he calls himself a bad husband. And that's his own estimation. So here he is rather terrified, because Jesus said to him, me phobete, which don't be afraid. So he's obviously afraid. And out blurts the truth. And but here's where Peter gets the whole thing all wrong. Very wrong. That this whole religion thing isn't for him or about him, when in fact it is. And the funny thing is, the one who it's not for? The one who doesn't see themselves as in need of a doctor, as one who is holy and pious. That's the one who religion is not for. God didn't come to save those who don't need a Savior. See how this works? If you're pious and you see yourself as pretty doggone good, God has no need for that. He doesn't want any part of that. You can do it, then you don't have anything to do with God. But for the very reason Peter states that Jesus should hike off, get out of the boat and leave, is the very reason that he should stay. Peter's got it just totally backwards. Because it's not the pious that need God. It's not these holier-than-thous that religion is for, or that God has come to care for. It's those who are sick, those who are injured, those who are lives who are messed up in sin, whatever that is. And we're so ignorant. We like a child. We see sin as a little grocery list of rights and wrongs. And that there couldn't be anything more stupid than that. That is, it's fine if you're 5 years old. But if you're a grown man or woman and you still think like that, God help you. You haven't grown at all. You're just taller. Sin is something else. Sin is not a little list of things right or wrong. Do you think God sent his son down this world to die on the cross for a little laundry list of things that you think are right or wrong? Are you out of your mind? No. Of course, that is not what this whole thing is about. And when Peter says, I'm a bad husband, he doesn't just mean that he does things wrong or checks off little things on a laundry list of right and wrong things. He's not stupid. I already said he's relatively bright. He runs a business. He fixes his boat. He sells fish. He's relatively bright. He's not stupid. And he even knows there's something wrong with him. But here's the bit. You know, if you got a hangnail on your toe, you don't cut your leg off to fix it. The remedy's got to match the malady. Well, God looked at our malady, our what's wrong with us, this thing that Peter calls sin, amartelos, and he says, God says the only remedy for this is to kill my son, to send his son here to be born of Mary, and then kill him? That's the remedy? Well, then I would like to know what the malady is, because it is not, I guarantee you, your little laundry list of things that you imagine to be right and wrong. Oh, I drank too much beer. I must be bad. You think Jesus came to this world to die on the cross because you drank too much beer? Then you're just stupid. That actually makes you dumb. Because you're insulting God. That's what that is. Jesus didn't come here to die on the cross for a little list of things that you think are right or wrong. It's what his dad thinks. And in his dad's estimation, God the Father, there is something heinously wrong with what you and I are. Not what we do. What we do are just symptoms of what's wrong with us. Like you go to the doctor and you say, Doctor, I got this weird feeling in my arm and my chest is beating funny and get these terrible dizzy spells. And the doctor says, we need to do some checks on your heart. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I get dizzy spells and I got pains in my side here. He goes, well, it's probably your heart. You think, well, what's that got to do with my arm, my leg? He says, no, you don't understand. There's something else wrong with you. When God the Father looks at us, we look at the symptoms and think that's what's wrong with us. Well, like a good doctor would know, that's what you think is wrong with you is probably not what's wrong with you. There's something far more serious. And that's what religion is. It's about something far, far more serious than whatever little imaginary things you come up with that think are right or wrong. Because what God the Father looks at human existence and weighs it in his scale and sees that it is heinously broken. And not just by what we do, it's by what we are. When Peter says, I'm a aner amartelos emi, I'm a bad husband. It's emi, I am. It's what I am. It's not just what I do, it's what I am. At least he got that part right. But telling Jesus to hike off, to leave, is what he got terribly wrong. It's because Peter is a mess. That's the one who religion is for. Because in spite of what you might think is wrong with you, when you go to the doctor, you're probably going to be wrong. They'll do blood work and exams and check you inside and out, and then they'll tell you what's wrong with you. Because half the stuff is actually wrong with us. We can't feel ourselves. We have to have a doctor tell us. Well, when God looks at us, he tells us that how broken we are. The only remedy for that malady is the death of his son. And even Jesus said, Dad, is there no other way? And Dad said, They are such an awful, disgusting, filthy, wretched mess. The only remedy anywhere is that my own son die for them. Now, I don't understand that. Then again, what am I? Way above my pay grade. Way above. But what Scripture tells us is that God's remedy for what's wrong with us fixes the entire situation, so that we're no longer a mess, but by His estimation, we become nice, happy, good. And it's not by what we do or a change in us, it's a change that He pronounces over us, about us, from His point of view, not from ours. You see, that's why those who think they're practicing religion by what they do, they don't understand anything. Religion isn't what you do. Religion is an opinion in the mind of God about you. He changes His verdict on you. He decides that instead of being strangers and enemies, you're His children. And there's nothing you can do to make that change. It's what He did for us. Over time, Peter would get this. He would understand this. So they eventually became head of the apostles. After listening to Jesus and Jesus correcting him over and over, because boy, Peter just, unfortunately, he had the popular idea of religion and didn't get the reality at all. The reality that God came for him. That God loved him. And did something just out of this world to make him family. Now that's what religion is about. And who's it for? Everyone. It doesn't matter about what your opinion of wrong or right is. Because there's all sorts of, especially religious people, they go, oh, well, that person does things wrong. Really? Boy, you're dumb. Boy, you're dumb. I just can't tell you how dumb you are. That person does things wrong? When God Himself says in the Old Testament, there's none that is righteous, no, not a single one. And God looked at this planet and said, they are all like sheep. They have all run off on their own. They have all gone astray. There is none that is righteous, not a single one. If you can look at that and then still think stupid thoughts like, well, that person is better than this person, well, you're still stupid. I can't fix stupid. But religion is for those who, like Peter, go, amartelos eimi. What I am is just horribly broken. I can't fix that. I wouldn't even know where to start. Instead, God came to fix it, and He did. He sent His Son, Jesus, born of Mary, who died on the cross. And the Father looked at that and said, yep, that works. Don't ask me how that works, because I don't know. But it worked. And who's it for? Everyone. Especially those who think it isn't for them. So, well, that's enough of that. This has been retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church. And take care. And remember that this whole religion thing is for you. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.